Hello, welcome to the Godless Family Webcast. I'm your host, Aubrey Adrianson, and with me today is Amanda Hayes. Say hello, Amanda.
Hi there.
Today we are going to be talking about Hindu myths. We'll spend a considerable amount of time on Lord Krishna and the story of Krishna, and we'll get into some other myths. But before we get into that, I do want to talk about Hinduism in general and why you're going to see kind of a difference in some of these myths. So a lot of people think of Hinduism as kind of like a pantheon of gods, so there's many gods. But it is different from Greek gods. A lot of Hindus do believe in the one true God, which would be Lord Vishnu, I believe. Or they believe that Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva are three faces of the same God. So there's it's not quite the same as like the Greek and Roman mythology, where all the gods are very separate entities. Also in Hinduism, you have the oh my gosh, I just totally drew a blank. The separation in society. Help me out, Amanda. Oh no.
Oh, the caste.
The caste. Yeah. The caste system. That's directly related to some of their myths. One of those myths talks about the creation of man, and man came from different parts of Lord Brahman. The lower caste came from his feet, and the higher caste came from his head, and that's how they justified the caste system. With this, it's a justification. Let's just call it what it is, of the caste system. And another interesting thing about Hinduism, and this is why you're going to see some of the differences in some of the very same myths, is it is a collection of stories from all over India and beyond. So a lot of times in India, just like in ancient Egypt, there were regional gods. Sometimes more than one, but sometimes a region would just have one god that they would worship to. And so people did travel between the regions, though. And so they would hear a story about Ganesha, and then that story would get transferred to another region, and maybe Ganesha would have a different name, or maybe Ganesha would have the same name, or maybe the story changed, or sometimes the people from one region would hear a story and say, oh, that sounds a lot like our God, the story we already have, and so we'll just change the name of our God to this other God, and then our story will be unchanged, and there'd still be slight differences between the two stories, though. So a lot of that is happening in India, and with these sacred texts. And so the sacred texts did try to kind of bring everyone together, and then as India became united, the gods kind of got pruned. So they tried to kind of narrow down the gods, try to fit the gods that were similar from one region to the next together, and so it's really a collection of regional religions, and that's how most people try to think of Hinduism or talk about Hinduism, is a collection of regional religions. But again, these regions do share similar stories because they were trading together, they were travelers, and so the stories were shared. And interestingly enough, in my research for this episode, I was reading that there was even communication between Egypt and India thousands of years before Jesus. And so these stories of like Isis and Horus and Krishna, if you look at those stories, they're actually quite similar, or they have a lot of similarities, and a lot of historians believe, or theologians believe, that they were communicating. There was some kind of trade or communication going on between India and Egypt, and so that's why those stories are so strikingly similar. And then, of course, we believe that a lot of the stories from the Jesus story came or was borrowed from stories from Egypt. So that's kind of how that all got around in this big circle.
Well, I thought it was interesting also. A lot of the stuff that I was reading kind of reminded me of when we were talking about Islam, where they said that it is more than a religion, it's kind of like a way of life. And so, kind of like you were talking about, they have the caste system, the societal structure that people are born into and supposedly can't cycle out of unless, you're a woman and you get married to a man out of your caste. But it's interesting because you can't really, like you said, you can't really pinpoint it into that one religion with one set of beliefs. Because I was telling you, I think in the email before the show, that everything that I had read said that they don't they don't necessarily believe in heaven and hell. They just believe in this constant reincarnation. And then I was looking at the sacred text that you sent me, and Krishna was talking about finding a place in heaven. So I was just like, wait, what?
Right, and that's one of the, I would say that's probably a regional difference. In Buddhism, which came from Hinduism, there's more talk of heaven and hell, based on my research anyway, that I found. And what the Buddhists believe is there are many heavens and there are many hells, and those are one of the places you can be reborn into. But you would eventually die in that heaven or hell, and then you would still continue the cycle of rebirth until you break the cycle, which is your ultimate goal.
Right.
And so I think that's present in some of the sects of Hinduism as well, although you don't see a lot of talk of heaven and hell in Hinduism. At least I haven't.
Yeah, that's what I've mostly seen in my research, is they don't talk about it very much. There's a lot about karma and reincarnation, but not very much about heaven and hell. So I was confused.
So you ready to dive into Krishna?
I think so.
So let's see here. I posted some links on the website, and one is a very long story of Krishna, and it's actually not even the whole story of Krishna. I believe there's an entire book devoted, and don't quote me on that, devoted to the life of Krishna. And so some important points that I want to point out, are that Krishna was born of a family of demigods. And that becomes important later when we talk about whether or not Krishna was born of a virgin. So I have some kind of ideas and theories on that I'll share with you. And his parents were imprisoned by a jealous king who was of the family but not a demigod. And it was predicted that the 8th son of, I lost it, is Deveshi. Do you remember her name?
Oh gosh,
Devaki.
Devaki.
Sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong.
Yeah.
The 8th son of Devaki will kill the evil king, whose name is Kamsa, I believe. And so he imprisons Devaki and her husband, but somehow in prison they're having babies. And he kills the first 6 and they were all sons. And then the 7th was I think a stillbirth or a miscarriage. Well, they just called it a miscarriage. But they believe that child was then immediately transferred to the womb of Yasoda. I believe it's Yasoda, who I believe is as a relative of some sort. And then there's the pregnancy that produces Krishna. And when Krishna is born, he is born in all of his glory as the king, which is kind of interesting. Like he was dressed, I believe.
Yeah, right. Yes, I remember that.
It was really weird. And Devaki and her husband are scared. They don't want their baby to die, so they're talking to him and asking him, please become a baby. We need to hide you. Kamsa is going to kill you. And so Krishna says, no, I'm going to perform. Basically, he's going to perform his first miracle. He's and the husband of Devaki is going to switch children. And so the Krishna puts all the guards to sleep, lets the dad out of the prison so the dad can go switch the babies and then come back. Okay, so that's kind of strange that you have this power to let people out of prison, but then they have to come back. But anyway, so that happens, and a lot of stuff happens, but basically Krishna is raised by this step family, and he performs several miracles as a child. He kills a demon snake. He saves some boys from the Brahma, the god Brahma, and moves a mountain to protect the village, or raises up this mountain to protect the village people from this horrible storm. So he's doing all these good deeds. And eventually there's a huge war, and Krishna helps, basically the good guys in the war to win. And it's a family war. And then in the end he dies, I believe, from an arrow. And that's kind of a really brief version of his life. And Amanda, is there anything you want to add?
Hopefully I'm not getting too far ahead of us, but I know that as far as his personality, when he was growing up, I think that he was painted as kind of like he was really mischievous, like he really liked playing pranks. He was a jokester. He messed around with people all the time. There was a lot of talk about stealing butter, and yeah, he stole a lot of butter. But yeah, he was when he was a kid and he lived with this like step family, or the adopted family or whatever. He was a cow herder, I guess, and so he spent a lot of time on the farm, like teasing the cows and getting into trouble, and as well as performing the miracles. And one miracle that I did remember is him uprooting that tree out of the ground and like pulling out the two people that ended up being one of like demigods that were trapped, I guess. Did you read about that?
I didn't read that one.
Oh, you did not?
Uh-uh.
Oh, okay. So yeah, he just like pulled up this tree, and like two guys came out from under it, and they were like, "We were demigods and we were trapped by so and so, and you just saved us. Thank you." So I thought that was really funny that all of a sudden he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna pull out this tree."
What I found interesting is, right from the time that he's born, he's very, he knows that he's a god. And everyone else knows that this boy is a god, and the word they use is avatar. He's an avatar of Vishnu, and that's one of the similarities between Krishna and Jesus. So if we wanted to maybe get into similarities, Jesus was the Son of God, but he was also God. He was one of the faces of God. And it's the same with Krishna. Krishna is the son. In a lot of ways, they consider him the son of Vishnu, but he was also Vishnu, and one of the faces of Vishnu. And what I found interesting is that everyone knew, though, unlike Jesus, everyone knew and treated him like he was a demigod. And anything you want to add to that?
Not as far as that. I know, I can't remember what the reason for it is, but I did notice there is a lot of focus on when he's a child. When he was like drawn or painted, he's almost always drawn as a child. He also usually has blue skin or like dark skin. I can't remember what that symbolizes. It's something.
I read that not too long ago, and I don't remember either.
Yeah, but he's usually drawn with blue skin, and he's usually got like one little leg up, and he's playing like a flute. That just, I guess, kind of adds to his boyish charm. So that's something that I noticed. But as far as other than that, I think it's interesting that everybody knows he's a god, and he's just he's very sure of himself. Like, I'm here to save all you people, so I'm gonna deal with my crap.
I think one of the reasons why he's so exalted too is everyone knows he's a god. He knows he's a god, but he's not, like a dick about it.
Right.
So, like, yeah, I'm here. I'm a god. I might pull on the cow's tail or steal butter, but I'm not like messing with people.
Yeah.
Just being a dude, and so I kind of respect him for that. You can get a big head.
Yeah, it's true.
Hope this document comes up. Oh, okay. And so, some other similarities, and Amanda, did you want to go over the similarities that you found, or you want me to go over mine?
Let me see if I can add anything to conversation, because I know I found a couple. You already said that he's essentially Vishnu's son, but also Vishnu reincarnate. Why don't you go ahead and I'll see if something comes to me.
Okay, I'm going to bring the document up. I ended up having to switch browsers, and I had everything up in one browser. So a couple of interesting similarities is Jesus and Krishna were both born in kind of meager settings. So Jesus was born in the manger, which is basically a stable, and Krishna was born in a prison. There were kings that were trying to kill both of the children because of a prophecy that was foretold. I already talked about Vishnu being the king, or Krishna being Vishnu. We'll get into the virgin birth in a little bit.
Farmers. They were both farmers.
Yes, that's it. They were both. Jesus was a sheep herder.
Yes.
He was a carpenter, but he's also depicted as herding sheep.
Yes.
And Krishna was a cow herder. Let me see. And then they're both considered saviors of mankind. So in the beginning of the Krishna story, and I did glaze over this, all the demigods got together and they went to Vishnu and said, "Oh, things are bad here on Earth. We need a savior. What will you help us?" And he helped by sending Krishna. And so they're both considered saviors of mankind, sent down to Earth from a supreme being.
Mm-hmm.
And they are both considered gods themselves. So those are the similarities that I found. And then, of course, the miracles. I mean, the miracles are different, though. They didn't perform the same miracles. I think that's important to note. That's all I have.
And make sure, if parents want to do their own research on this, make sure that they actually try and get as close to the source material as possible for similarities, because there are a lot of websites that say that they're, apples to apples as far as Jesus and Krishna, and it's not accurate. I saw stuff that said they did perform the same miracles, that, they had the exact same nicknames, and they went to the same places at the same ages, and not all of that is 100% accurate. So if you're doing more research on it, don't just go to Joe Schmo's website and take what they have to say.
Yeah, I wouldn't even go to I would be careful going to a website where someone's doing the comparison for you, because I did that. I was looking for similarities, and I wanted to find more than what was in that one story that I posted. And I went to this one website, and they really summarized it, and they made it sound like it was all the same stuff. And so it's really misleading. So I agree with Amanda. I would go to websites that are maintained by Hindus or Hindu societies. They don't have temples. So, yes, a group of Hindus.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's what I tried to do as much as possible for the research. So let's get into the virgin birth a little bit. So some people say that Krishna was born of a virgin, that Devaki was a virgin. And a lot of people say, well, that's weird because she had 7 kids before him and she was married. And so I did quite a bit of research on this, and the first thing that I came up with that I found real interesting, and I did post a link to that on the website, is kind of this analysis of virgin births. That so these virgin goddesses that gave birth to gods, and Krishna and Devaki are on there. And the opening paragraph, I want to read it because I found it to be very interesting. The goddesses have stories to tell. One such story, far too long ignored, is that in their original, unadulterated form, they were, oh, I'm going to pronounce this wrong,
Parthenogenic.
Parthenogenic, thank you. The word parthenogenesis comes from the Greek parthenos, virgin, more or less. And so there is something lost in translation there. And Gneshtai means to be born. It means essentially to be born of a virgin, that is, without the participation of a male. And I think that's an important difference, that you could not be a virgin, well, in the religious sense, you could not be a virgin and still get pregnant without the participation of a male. That's basically the analysis here. So for a goddess to be parthenogenic thus means that she stands as a primordial creatrix who requires no male partner to produce the cosmos, earth, life, matter, and even other gods out of her own essence. Plentiful evidence shows that in their earliest cults, before they were subsumed under patriarchal pantheons as wives, sisters, and daughters of male gods, various female deities in the ancient Mediterranean world were indeed considered self-generating virgin, I know I'm pronouncing this wrong, creatrixes. And so then it goes, and then this website lists several of these goddesses. And remember that Devaki is a demigod. And also in the Krishna story, one of the relatives of Devaki learns a mantra so that she can become pregnant without having sex with her husband. And so this was something that Indians believe that demi-goddesses could do. They could produce children without the help of a man. So I do believe there's a little lost in translation when we're looking at the Krishna story. But in the Hindu mythology, this was something that Devaki could have done. And then also, they were, I believe, again, I'm looking at one interpretation of the story, so I'm not sure exactly the timeline. But Devaki and her husband get married, and then as they're going away from their wedding, Kamsa captures her and puts them in prison. So it could be that they weren't actually together in prison, so you could rationalize that as well. But I do think it's possible that the Hindu idea of the virgin birth might be slightly different from the Christian idea of the virgin birth, but they're not that far off. Any thoughts on that, Amanda?
Yeah, Steve gets mad at me because I say too much, but I'm going to keep on. I'm going to go through. When I did the research on it, I did see some people who said the idea of a virgin birth is a little bit like you were saying. Maybe there's a difference in the definitions exactly or the semantics of the idea of being a virgin. So maybe she wasn't a virgin in the sense that we would think, which means she's never had sex with anybody. That because, you know, if she's had 7 kids, then she could have procreated with her husband. They could have been in the same cell. But it could also, she could have gotten pregnant by her own accord without having sex, which is what they considered being born a virgin. Does that make sense? I feel like
Yes.
I'm kind of summarizing what you already said. But
And,
one term that I did see thrown around was the idea of divine conception, which means that maybe she wasn't like, it still could be a virgin birth, but it just means when the child was conceived, it wasn't through the traditional means of
mhm.
having sex with her husband.
Yep. Yeah, and those, I think those are the two ideological differences between whether or not Krishna was born of a virgin or not. And so I think that's it for Krishna. Do we have anything else to add?
Ah, I don't think so.
So it was interesting and fun, and I liked what I found in the research. This I didn't realize. It's one of those things where you suspect that Egypt and India were communicating because some of the stories are so similar. But then to read it, from a historical website, you're like, oh, okay, yay. I'm not crazy. These stories really are that similar.
Right.
Uh,
Right, yeah, and I think there are other stories. I think one of them we were going to talk about later of the flood myth that is really similar throughout many different religions.
Yeah, and the flood myth is the one I want to do first because it's the one I know the best. Um, and so if you read the Noah's myth, and there's a very similar myth from Assyrian mythology. It actually has a couple of different names. I've seen it, Sumerian, Assyrian, but the one with Eno and Utnapishtim, I can never pronounce it. I can spell it. Those stories are quite similar, and so you can. It's one of those ones where you can see, yeah, that Noah myth really did come from Assyrian mythology. It's pretty obvious. And then you have the Greek myth, which is still very similar, um, but it's kind of a departure from the Bible and from the Assyrian myth. And then you have the Hindu myth, which is even a greater departure. So I think of the four, it is the most dissimilar. But I want to talk about how it's similar to the Greek myth. So I'm going to read the Greek myth that I have summarized here, and I'll read the Hindu myth, and we all know the Noah myth, so we can compare the three. So in the Greek myth, Zeus heard rumors of mankind's wickedness, so he disguised himself as a human and went down to earth to learn more. His son Hermes went with him and advised Zeus to visit 3 households. If 2 of the 3 households were deemed good, then Zeus agreed not to destroy all of mankind. And even though Zeus and Hermes visited 2 virtuous homes, Zeus still wanted to rid the world of wicked men, so Zeus decided to bring a great flood to the earth. Some stories say that Prometheus warned Deucalion? Oh, I used to know how to pronounce these words. I'm sorry. Deucalion, I'm going to say. Others say that Zeus did. Either way, Deucalion was instructed to build a large chest that would protect him and his family from the flood. The rest of mankind had to swim to mountaintops in order to escape the flood. The flood, which lasted for 9 days and 9 nights, destroyed all living things except the sea creatures and the few humans who managed to find a mountaintop. Eventually, Deucalion, his wife Pyrrha, and their family landed on Mount Parnassus. On Parnassus, Deucalion made a sacrifice to Zeus, thanking him for saving them. Later, Deucalion and Pyrrha were instructed to go down the mountain and cast behind you stones of your mother. And that's in quotes. Because the first men were made of clay, Deucalion believed that the bones meant rocks. So Deucalion and Pyrrha threw stones behind them, which then turned into new humans. The stones Deucalion threw became men, and the stones Pyrrha threw became women. And so now here's the Hindu story. And so as with all Hindu myths and stories, there are some differences and some different versions of the same story. So this is just kind of a greatly reduced version. In the Hindu flood story, the god Vishnu appears to Manu, and Manu is considered the one ancestor for all mankind because of this flood, basically. So he appeared to Manu as a fish and asked Manu to protect him. For many years, Manu takes care of the fish until it is large enough to go out to sea on its own. Sometime after that, a great flood happens, and the fish comes back to Manu and leads him to a mountain for safety. And once Manu is safe, he creates a woman, Ela, to repopulate the earth with. And what I find interesting is in every version of the story that I read, they refer to Ela as his daughter and his wife, which I find creepy.
Yeah, that's.
But he makes her, I believe, out of mud. I can't remember, mud or clay, and repopulates the earth with her. And so the Greek story is very similar to the Noah story in that there's a box or some kind of container that the one righteous man goes into, and his family, and it lands on a mountaintop, and they get out, they make a sacrifice, and they repopulate the earth. And the similarity between the Greek story and the Hindu story is the creation of people again. So Manu creates one other woman for him to repopulate the earth with. I believe it's out of clay, and Deucalion and Pyrrha throw stones behind them to make people to repopulate the earth with. So Amanda, any thoughts before I continue babbling?
Well, you're not babbling. The first thought is the same thing I feel about the Noah myth. Having one family or one couple repopulate the entire earth is really gross. I don't like it. And having that as especially part of a children's story, it's just wrong. I don't like that.
I like how, well, I don't know if I like, but in all the stories there's one virtuous man. So everyone else, they're horrible. I'm a god, I don't like humans anymore. Oh, but that guy.
Yeah.
And
what is it about them that makes them more virtuous than everybody else? That's it.
And it's never explained, just that he's more virtuous. And,
yes.
And then in the Greek story is the only one where other humans actually survive, and Deucalion and Pyrrha just create some extra. So it's the only story where it isn't one incestuous family repopulating the earth with. There's actually some other humans.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes. That would be a way better story to tell and to feel comfortable with as far as your origins if you're a young Earth creationist. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So with the Hindu story, though, again, Vishnu is appearing as a fish, one of his avatars. One of his avatars is also of a snake. And so he materializes in some form to interact with mankind. Which is very Vishnu. The Vishnu thing to do. Any stories that you wanted to go over? Are we finished with this one? I feel like we're kind of done with this one.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think I have anything to add to that. Although I do think it's interesting. I mentioned this on Twitter about how, as far as religion in general, these sort of ideas are all very similar about a flood and essentially cleansing the world of sin. Because you don't hear I'm not well versed on every religion, but you don't hear of burning humanity in a fire. It's always a flood. It's always washing away all of the people and drowning them all. So that's sometimes, when I hear those recurring things, I'm like, did they all just borrow it from each other? I just feel like maybe one person.
Credit to the idea.
What's that?
Definitely lends credit to the idea.
Yeah.
That they all borrowed it from each other.
Yes, or there's, only one true God that's just retold all over the world. I don't know. I
And
guess depending on where you live.
right, it does depend.
Yours is the true God depending on where you live.
Interesting thing about the Hindu gods and I studied Hindu religions or Hindu mythology and Indian traditions. It was called in college. And one thing that's really interesting is there's a group of Europeans that actually migrated over to northern India. I believe it was the Aryans. I believe it's called the Aryan group. And they brought with them some of these gods and some of these stories. So there's a lot of this. It's so circular, the sharing of ideas. So the Aryans are coming over. They're sharing their ideas with the Indians, some of which were already there, and they already had their gods. And so there's this mingling. And then there's the communication between India and Egypt, and then Egypt is influencing what's happening on the Arabian Peninsula, and then a lot of that's getting pushed up into Persia and then into Europe, and it does feel very connected, especially when you start looking at these stories from that part of the world. There's a lot of similarities.
Yes, a lot of recurring themes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So was there a story that you wanted to go over? I wasn't nothing really when I looked at when I read the stories. Nothing really stood out to me as anything I really wanted to cover. So I kind of was hoping you'd have something that you really wanted to cover.
Oh man!
If not, I can come up with something fast.
Well, I was wondering, as far as I think for my kids, one of the things that I would really like for them to know is maybe just some of the basics of Hinduism as far as how people worship and a little bit about their ideas. Is that something you might want to go over?
I could go over a little bit of it.
I have some of it that I looked at and just kind of some of the ideas behind it if if you have kids in your class or kids that you know that are Hindus, so that your child can be a little, culturally respectful of them and have a little bit of an idea where they're coming from.
I find Hindus very easy to interact with, especially the ones that come to America, because they already know our culture. They know about Christianity, and so I find that, like I said, I find them easy to interact with. They don't have a lot of taboos. Eating beef is the biggest as far as I know. And some of so they do have some other taboos that are typical of other religions. If you're a very strict Hindu, then you are going to be a virgin when you get married. If you're a strict Hindu, you are going to follow the caste system and try to, especially when you're in India, you're going to follow it. When you're in the U.S., you might interact with Indians that are not in your caste, just to be around other Indians, but you certainly wouldn't marry out of your caste unless you felt very Americanized. Arranged marriages is still a thing, and even Indian Americans that I know still agree to have their marriages arranged for them by their family. And a lot of that is to stay within the caste, to bring honor to the family. Family honor is a big deal, especially for the higher castes. But they don't. The Indians that still participate in the arranged marriages don't see that as a bad thing. They see that as a very positive thing, because there's so much support from both sides of the family for that marriage. They're very well supported, not only financially but emotionally, and so that's a big deal. Where if you do get married without the consent of either parent, you can actually be ostracized by your family, which is then makes your life much harder.
Right.
as it would for anyone. But some of the basic religious ideas we've kind of gone over. There's the idea of karma. So if you do something good, you get good karma. If you do something bad, you get bad karma. And if you accumulate too much bad karma, when you die, you are reborn into a lower caste or a lower life form.
Yeah, like a plant or an animal.
Yes. Yeah.
I do have a question about that. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's okay.
But when you are being reincarnated and you become a plant or an animal, is the main idea is that you keep the same soul, right?
Yes.
But you still have a consciousness even if you are an animal or a plant. Is that true?
You don't retain the consciousness of your former self.
Okay.
So you have the consciousness of that animal or that plant, and you have to work your way back up somehow without retaining knowledge of your former self.
Okay. So, yeah, I guess I just like how you could work your way up from being a plant, you know what I mean? Like, or an animal. They're not really like, not a lot of them are altruistic, if you know what I mean. So I guess that doesn't make sense to me. But it's mythology, so I can't ask too many questions, I guess.
Yeah, and that would be something I would definitely ask a Hindu. I do not know how you can work your way up from a plant who many people believe don't have a consciousness at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I would definitely direct that towards a Hindu.
Yes.
So you would have to work your way up. The highest caste is the Brahma caste, but you don't necessarily go from Brahma to the end of this cycle of reincarnation, which is your ultimate goal. There are still other higher life forms, cows being one of them, which is why Hindus are considered cow worshippers. Cows are considered a higher life form than humans. There are others, but I don't know what they are. And then there's, of course, depending on what sect of Hinduism, there's being reborn a demigod or into a heaven. And even in those instances, you need to keep collecting that good karma and earning your end of rebirth, basically.
Right, which is like their ultimate goal is to be integrated with God, right? To stop the cycle of rebirth so that they can...
Stop the cycle of rebirth.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And what are some other things?
Well, I know... Sorry, go ahead. I know that a lot of people, even people that I've talked to who are close to me, do kind of think of it as polytheistic. And from everything that I've read, it's really not. I mean, they have, Vishnu that has supposedly can take 3 different forms, and then they have like millions of other, I would say deities, but it's not. There's still one true God, so they're still monotheistic, in a general sense. Is that what you came across?
Yes, I do think there is some disagreement among some of the Hindus on it. From what I've read, some believe that there's one, the highest God, which would be Vishnu, and then all the other gods are lower.
Mm-hmm.
But what God you choose to worship, if you don't worship Vishnu, he's not going to be offended.
Yes.
So
yes, that's a very important point. Yes.
You don't have to worry about worshiping the one true God in Hinduism. There are others that believe that so Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva are the 3 main gods. They're the 3 most important. So others believe that they are all the same faces, or different faces of the same god, and that any of the demigods under that are still connected to them in some way. So there's some kind of avatar is the word I hear being used a lot of this ultimate being. So those are the 2 different versions I've heard. No, it's not polytheism in the sense that we think of like Greek and Roman mythology.
Mm-hmm.
So there are, and because there's these are regional gods in a lot of ways, and in different regions, they do worship differently. And there's there's regional holidays. So there isn't even like one united Hindu holiday. It all depends on what part of India you're from. So one of the most popular Indian holidays or Hindu holidays is the holiday of Holi, where they're throwing the dye at you. You know, they have that big, like they do the color runs now in the U.S. That's kind of reminiscent of Holi, but that's not celebrated everywhere. And Diwali is another really popular one. It's called the Festival of Lights. That's not celebrated everywhere either. But there's different ways to worship. The most common form of worship is called puja, and where you take a picture or a statue of something of your god, and you give it a ceremonial bath. You dress it up. You give it perfume. You spray perfume. You basically worship, in the physical sense. You worship this statue or this picture. You burn incense, and then you pray for whatever it is you wish from that god or goddess. And if they're happy with your worship, or with the way you've treated that statue or that picture, they could then enter the picture or the statue and then grant you your wish. So that's one form of worship. But there's so many, and it's a very decentralized religion. So there isn't, the Catholics have Rome. They don't have anything like that. There are some gurus that give advice, worshiping advice. Some Hindus do penance, much in the same way that Christians would maybe do penance, especially, not flogging. Although I don't know. I don't know. And the penance is to get rid of bad karma, so that your balance of bad karma to good karma goes up. So you can do penance to get rid of bad karma. Yeah, and that's basically all I know about Hinduism. But like I said, Hindus don't have a lot of rules aside from you doing those things to collect that good karma. And in order to collect that good karma is all the things that we agree on in modern society that are good things to do. We're not going to kill anyone. We're not going to steal. We're going to be kind to people. We're going to give to charity. That's take care of the poor. Those kinds of things to collect the good karma. So.
Yes. One thing that I really like, what you mentioned earlier about them not having like a hierarchy of leadership as far as their religion, because you obviously in Christianity you have a lot of abuse of power going on, and a lot of influence in places where it shouldn't be influenced. And I also like that they don't. The different from Christianity is they don't seem to go on these huge persecution rants of people, of homosexuals or people who worship other gods or people of other religions. They're very I had a great word for it earlier, but they're really nice to people, even if you don't believe the same thing as them. They're really accepting and welcoming of so many different types of people. Whereas if you piss off the wrong Christian, you know what I mean, your house could be egged, or they could, smash your car windows or something like that. So I really like that about them.
There is some of that does happen in India. So the Indians that are here don't do that so much, but homosexuality is looked down upon in Indian society. Women are marginalized. Women, in some sects of Hinduism, women can't even ever, they can't escape the cycle of rebirth. They have to be reborn as a man first in order to escape that cycle. So there is some of that does happen. And there is kind of a hierarchy as far as the caste system goes.
I guess that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Brahmins are the most richest, the richest, the most richest, the richest and the most influential. And a lot of the other castes kind of are at their mercy in Indian society. So there is some conflict. And then also over in India, there's conflict between the Indians and the Muslims. And a lot of that started when the Muslims were kind of moving across Asia and taking over Asia and basically forcing people to convert. There's still a lot of animosity held over from that, and so there's still conflict there as well. But I do agree with you that I do find Hindus to be much more accepting of people who worship other deities. And I think that stems from this idea of the caste system. So, first of all, you can't convert to Hinduism. Did you know that?
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah, because you have to be born into Hinduism. And so, so in a Hindu's mind, you are just lower. You're just not, I don't want to say a lower life form, but you're not up there spiritually yet. You haven't collected enough karma yet to get reborn as a Hindu. So you're still all right. You're still a human. I'm still going to be kind to you because I don't want to collect bad karma. But spiritually, we haven't collected enough karma yet in the mind of a Hindu.
Interesting. So I guess maybe I was just thinking about more of the American Hindus that have kind of established themselves here. So as far as like the treatment of women, I don't know if you mind if we talk about that for a few minutes. But I know that there are kind of similar to Islam, where even having like a daughter as a baby, or even kind of like sort of borrowing what's happened in China, is where just having a baby that's a daughter is they're kind of like, no, like I would rather have a man. You know what I mean? So I guess do you have some of the same issues in Hinduism as far as treatment of women and daughters?
I don't think so. Men are more valuable because they're the ones that hold property. At least traditionally, they are. I do think that's a little different now, but women are still protected. The protected class, and I put protected in quotes because they are marginalized a lot, and you read a lot of stories coming out of India of women being gang raped, and then the woman being blamed for it, or the family being paid off not to press charges, or the police not even allowing the woman to press charges. So there's quite a bit of misogyny going on over there, and it's interesting because we think of India as kind of very free sexually. We have the Kama Sutra and the tantrics, I believe that's what they're called. So I don't think it's everywhere, but I don't know. I know what I know just because I know of quite a few Hindus that have come over here from India.
Mm-hmm.
So and then I read up on it, but I don't know what it's truly like for women over there. I don't really know.
Okay.
If you are in an area that's heavily Muslim, and there are sections of India that's mostly Muslim, you're going to see more of that. Where the women go out, they have to cover, they should cover if they want to be protected. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. I don't know enough.
Okay. Yeah, I was just really curious about how if they have the same kind of idea of being, property, or sort of essentially just a caretaker, there to, maintain the house and take care of the children and make the husband's life happier.
That is the expectation.
Okay.
That a wealthy, well-respected family is not going to have women working outside of the home.
Okay. And they do that idea of the dowry, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I joke about that sometimes. We have friends who have boys who are the same age as my daughter, and they're always like, "Oh, that's cute. They're gonna be boyfriend and girlfriend." I'm like, and like depending on who it is, I'm like, "I'll pay a higher dowry for her."
Yeah, and it's the way the dowry works is you pay to get rid of your daughter, basically.
Yeah,
And that's
exactly.
different, and it's different in other cultures, because I know that in Saudi Arabia, there's a bride price that the groom pays, or the groom's
Right.
family pays. And that's her money. The husband has no control over that money at all. That's hers. She can do whatever she wants with it. She can use it to contribute to the family. She can put it in a savings account. She can go on a crazy shopping spree. So the dowry is different from culture to culture, but most of the time it's the family of the bride paying the groom for her, and then he would then use that money to build a life together.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting how you have those two things where I guess it just that's so funny. I just feel like, either way, like my parents would be like SOL when it came to like bride price or like paying a dowry, you know what I mean? Like,
I know, same here. I think about that. I'm like, man, I could just imagine my dad sitting me down and being like, well, it's a good thing you're pretty, because I don't have any money, so go find yourself a rich guy that wants a pretty young thing. Good
yeah,
luck.
exactly. Exactly.
I'm
I'm
just
really sorry to tell you this, but I literally have no dowry money. I'm so sorry.
Yep. So I think that's it. Um, all the links I will keep up. So if you want to read more about Krishna or some of the other Hindu myths, you can go to the Godless Family website and find them there. Next week, actually, I just found out today that Religious Tourist on Twitter, so it's at ReligiousT, he is going to join us this Sunday, which is 10 o'clock Amanda's time, which is Pacific time, and 1 o'clock Eastern time. And we're going to talk about what he's been doing for the past, I think it's 14 months. And he has been basically trying on various religions. And so I'm really excited to have him on and to hear what he has to say about the various religions, from not only from an atheist perspective, but as a participant in those religions. So if you have any questions, I'd love if you would email them to me, and that's godlessfamily@gmail.com for Religious Tourist. And then 2 weeks from today, we're going to have Dr. David Hawkes back on, and we're going to talk about, okay, I'm going to say it the way everyone else, homeopathy. And that's going to be fun. I like talking to David.
I do too. He's really awesome. He's really knowledgeable about so many topics, and homeopathy is, and essentially the whole idea of pseudoscience is a really interesting topic.
Mm-hmm. And he explains it in a way that I think everyone can understand, which is why I really love having him on. So we're looking forward to that. That's on the 23rd. So I think that's it. Anything you want to promote?
Just the same thing as usual. Prophetcast Sundays at 9:30 Pacific time.
Awesome. What are you guys doing this Sunday?
Oh, don't ask me that. I don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's fine. Oh my gosh, yeah. Steve and I took a break from it for a couple of weeks, so now everything, or just like, I know I'm pretty sure it's Steve and David, but they're just kind of like, whatever.
Sometimes it's fun to do that, though. I mean, I had a lot of fun doing this, but I've also done a lot of research on Hinduism already, so it was easy for me to speak on it. But if it had been something I didn't know about, I'd been like, Amanda, help me. I want to come on the show. I need a guest fast.
Yeah, it's definitely very, very unstructured. I mean, we try to have some loose topics, but yeah.
Well, it's a fun show. I like it. So
Good.
Everyone should watch it. And then I still want to promote Be Secular. They've got their thumbs in many pies, doing a lot of cool stuff. So definitely go to their website, check them out. You can support Godless Family by making a purchase via Be Secular. So they try really hard to support a lot of different atheist and secular organizations, and then they also try to funnel some of that money into other projects. So they're a great organization to get to know and support if you have extra 20, 25 bucks you want to throw at some cause to support. Not only would you be supporting whatever artist you choose to support, and there's many to choose from, not just Godless Family, you're supporting the secular, who is then funneling that money back into the atheist, or the secular community, I should say. So they're awesome. And so that's it for today. Oh, go ahead.
No, I agree. That's all I said.
Okay. So that's it for today. I hope to see everyone on Sunday when we talk to the religious tourist. Bye, everybody.
Bye.